Kia ora everybody, ko moana taku ingoa. I am from Community Research, and thank you very much for joining us this morning as we speak about conceptions of housing, Papakainga, co-housing and perceptions of home. Thank you very much to our New Zealand Sign Language interpreters. They'll be swapping in and out as we're going today. And a warm welcome to our panel members, and also to Joanne Waitoa, who's doing our emceeing this morning. Okay, whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. Yes, so welcome, and I'll pass over to Joe to introduce our panelists. As we have quite a few attendees today, and thank you all for joining us again, if you have any questions during the panel, just pop them in the chat, and I will at the end of the process pass on a few of those questions to just start the discussion time at the end, which should be happening from 11:40. We'll have 15 minutes for that. I am going to just start some questions as well in the chat for people to chat and share their thoughts as we go. So, Joe, over to you.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ngā mihi mō te karakia mōna. I'll just really briefly introduce myself as well. I know we don't have heaps of time. Ko waio, he uri ahau no Ngāti Porou ki te taha o tōku papa, no kotirana no airana ki te taha o tōku mama, kei tono ho au ki Wairarapa, ko Joanne Waitoa tōku ingoa. Thank you again for joining us to discuss kaupapa this morning. It's really exciting to have these three panelists with us today, and I will introduce them, and then they will start the kōrero. So first we have Dr. Amohia Bolton, who's the director at Papakāinga Research Services. Dr. Bolton will be talking about the perceptions of the Papakāinga Research Project. Then we have Dr. Tanya Allport, who's a senior researcher at Papakāinga Research Services, and Dr. Allport will talk about the follow-up study called Tō Mātou Kainga, Tō Mātou Kaipo, whānau conceptions of home, supporting flourishing home environments. And finally, Dr. James Bergen, senior lecturer at the School of Architecture, Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington. Dr. Bergen will be talking about his research on kaupapa kainga and exploring the potential for Māori co-housing. And with that, I will hand over to Dr. Amohia Bolton. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Joe. Kai ara ki te mana oranga, runga ki raro, ki roto ki waho, haumi e hui e tai ki e. Ko Amohia Bolton tōku ingoa, he uri ahau no Ngāti Ranginui, Ngaiterangi, Ngāti Pukenga, Ngāti Mutunga, me Te Aotearoa o te waka Māori hoki. Engari, koe te kai whakahaere o Papakāinga Research Services, te rōpū rangahau no Ngāti Hauiti ki Rangitike. Good morning to everyone. Thank you, Moana, Joe, Owen, who's not here, the tech guys, and the New Zealand Sign Language interpreters. I've never been in a webinar with sign language, so I'm going to get distracted by that. That's amazing. Thanks for this webinar. It's a really important kaupapa, becoming even more so, which means that we need really transformational and innovative solutions, and we want to talk about some of those today. Or at least Tanya will get to that today. So I wanted to give a little bit of background, tiny bit of background about whakauai and how we got into this work. So our particular context is quite important to us. Whakauai is a research centre that is iwi owned and iwi mandated, and we undertake health and social sciences or social services research. We think we're the only iwi owned health research centre in Aotearoa. We're owned by a very small iwi, Ngāti Hauiti. They are rural, and our offices are physically located in a provincial town, so Wanganui. So because we're independent, because the people who give us the mandate to do this research are mostly rural, we've got a very definite perspective on the world, and that influences the questions we ask and how we ask them. We came into housing research through our interest in whānau water and whānau wellbeing. We have a long history of looking at aspects of whānau water as a practice, as a philosophy, and looking at aspects of resilience, all those things that we need to keep well and happy and healthy and flourishing as Māori. And so our entree into housing research came about because of some work that we were doing with, we were invited to do some work with Whānau Waipareira's research centre, Y Research. And at that time, Tanya was there. And they had asked us to do, or to partner with them on a piece of research that was looking, which we call the Catalyst of Health research, looking at the catalysts which allowed Māori to move from a state of crisis to one of stability and of flourishing. That piece of research centred around particularly the whānau in West Auckland around Te Whānau Waipareira. And the findings from that study showed that while there had been, this drift to the urban areas, and that many of those whānau had to relinquish or let go of more conventional expressions of being Māori, they also sought and fought very hard to maintain their communal modes of social and political organisation. So they tried to cleave very hard to what it meant to be Māori in an urban setting. And furthermore, they were looking for spaces within an urban setting that allowed them to reclaim their Māoritanga in whatever way that could be expressed in this contemporary world. So those findings made us think about identity, and specifically identity in relation to place. And we asked ourselves, what might be the difference between those whānau in an urban setting and the whānau who we engage mostly with in Ngāti Hauiti, who are more rurally based for the most part? And what, if any, were the differences between those two populations, and what did they understand about identity and place? So really, we got into housing research because we wanted to know about how people flourish as Māori in the place where they inhabit, which led us to the Perceptions of Papakainga study. And we undertook that work in 2019, and we had 4 major themes that emerged. And I think on the community research website, you've got our booklet that we produced, but there are also a series of papers from both of the pieces of work that I've talked about, and I've asked if a set of references can be sent out to people if they're interested after this. So the 4 themes that emerged from the Perceptions of Papakainga study, perhaps unsurprisingly, home is not just your whare. So home is not just a physical place where you live. It's not just the roof under which you shelter. People talked about concepts of ahika, of those home fires that burn, of ahika roa, what it means to be the tender of those fires of home for a long period of time. And sometimes you might be the only people, a few people who retain that notion of ahika roa. They spoke also of the notion of kaitiakitanga, of being a caretaker for that place, and that place where you live that you call home. Secondly, home, again, not unsurprisingly, is about connections. So connections to those people who live immediately with you, but also connections to tūpuna, to connections to people who have passed on, but also connections to that place, to that whenua, and to waterways and other sites of significance. People talked about home including an element of wairua, which we took to mean for this study the aspects of a home that keep you safe and secure, that nurture you, that ground you, that keep you tau, for want of a better word. And then home is also about a sense of belonging. So for some, that was expressed in terms of direct whakapapa, so your whakapapa back to your tūpuna that have been in this place and that you call home. For others, it was about ukaipōtanga, so the notion of a place or a land, a whenua, that feeds you, that nourishes you, that sustains you, and your connection to that place. While you might not have tūpuna or whakapapa connections there, that place has sustained you and grown you. So either way, home has to be a place where you feel secure and safe enough to be your true self. So what did we take from all of that? So for our participants, all of whom were Māori, you can't talk about home and housing and assume you're talking about the same thing. So we require a more nuanced, a more holistic and a more multidimensional understanding of what the word home means if we are to meet the needs of Māori when it comes to thinking about housing. So if we don't think about that, if we don't do that, then there's the potential of adding to trauma, adding to harm, adding to disconnect and feelings of isolation that we know our whānau already have from a process of colonisation and of urban drift. So if we don't want to do more damage, we need to be a bit more subtle and a bit more nuanced, a bit more understanding of what it is that Māori are seeking when they talk about home and what home means to them. The research obviously threw up many more questions, as research always does for us. Tanya's going to talk about some of those, but we thought that it would be interesting for people, rather than necessarily always hear what the researchers have to say, if you heard the voices of our participants. And so we've got a couple of videos about that. Kia ora.
Is that working now?
No pautoa hau, ko te uri o hau te hapu, ko Ngāti Whātua te iwi, ko Waikaretu te marae, ko Muarangi te maunga, ko te kaipara te moana, ko Jamie tōku ingoa. For me, my tūranga waiwai isn't necessarily associated with my marae. My Papakainga is more about home and my sense of belonging and where I feel most comfortable. So for me, my marae has never really been about where my roots are. My roots are where my family are, my immediate family, my children, my husband, where my mum and stepdad live, and my sister, and our bond that we have where we live. Yeah, I've always had quite a separate idea to maybe what the more traditional idea is about tūranga waiwai, just because I don't have that deep connection to my marae.
My name's Al Stevenson. For me, my place of home probably would feel like Piha Beach, West Auckland. It's just a really beautiful place to grow up, and it's definitely a big part of who I am now. Where I see the world is a lot due to how I was raised out here, close proximity of nature and the beach. All my family, all my cousins grew up here as well. So we had that strong sense of family connection, just all growing up together, playing at the beach, surfing, swimming in the rivers and stuff. All going to the same primary schools pretty much. I went to school at Liston, grew up around Henderson, catching the bus from Piha every day out to Liston. The place that we stand, where you feel at home, might not be where your ancestors are from, but it's where you've built, a new sense of connection with, I guess, yeah.
Ko ruahine te paimanga, ko rangatike te awa, ko Ngāti Haukaha te hapu, ko rata te marae, ko Ngāti Hauati tōku iwi, ko Heather Gifford tōku ingoa, ko Tāwhara Pīrere tōku kuia, ko Bubs Gifford tōku māma. Home is very much Whanganui. But that's about a physical space for me of living with my partner, Awhina. It's where our children have been born. But if I'm thinking with my Hauati hat on, if I'm thinking Hauati, home is rata. For me, tūranga waiwai is home, that feeling of home. That sense of knowing where you're from, being able to stand on the whenua, really, with some sense of confidence and feeling welcome. There is a sense of comfort, there's a sense of safety, there's a sense of belonging, all of those things.
I te tāna tōku kraua, ko Takitime Tuaka, ko Maumau kai te maunga, ko Nuhaka te awa, ko Tāne Nui Arangi te marae, o Ngāti Rākai Pāka. Te tāna tōku kuia, ko Takitimu anō, te waka, ko Ruahine te pai maunga, ko Aorangi te maunga tapu, ko Rangi Tīkei te awa, ko Ngāti Whitikaupeka, ko Winiata, ko Rāta ngā marae, o Ngāti Whitikaupeka, Ngāti Hinamanu, Ngāti Hauati, ko Never Lomax tōku ingoa. Kia ora. Well, I think of Papakainga as being where I grew up. For me, Utuku and Rata are the most important areas as far as being Papakainga and where I feel that I come from. Our main river to obtain sustenance and refresh our wairua was the Rangi Tīkei. All the whānau gathered there. That's my view on Tūranga Waiwai, that you've come from that land, you remain part of it until you return to it. Being where our roots are, this is where our tūpuna lived and died and are buried. The fact that we have whenua that belongs not only to yourself personally, but is shared or as part of whenua that's owned by the people of your hapu or iwi, that's Tūranga Waiwai for me.
I don't think Papakainga is just about a house on iwi land. It should be about a whole philosophy about how do we live our lives.
Thank you for those videos, Amohia. That was really beautiful to hear some different perspectives there. Let's move on to Tanya, I believe.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you, Amohia. Ko Tanya upo tōku ingoa, no te awa hau. He moko punoho o te whānau hebeli ka noho ahau ki Tamaki Makaurau. And yes, I'm senior researcher at Whakawai Research, and as Amohia said, I was part of the original Papakainga and the Catalyst of Health research. And so I'm here today to talk to you about the follow-up study that we're doing currently, because as Amohia said, we had more questions than answers from the Papakainga study that we wanted to delve into, and we were lucky enough to be awarded a program grant, which is called Kia Pua Wai Ake Nā Uri Whakatupu, which is funded by the Health Research Council, and it's a 5-year program of research looking at how we use our mātauranga Māori for Māori health equity. And it has 4 particular projects. One of them is looking at governance and leadership for iwi. One of them is looking at primary healthcare pathways and cancer for Māori. And the housing one is the 3rd one. And then we have a translation uptake and impact project alongside of this. So the Tomato Kainga project, the aims of it really were to dig a little bit deeper to understand whānau conceptualizations of home related to connectedness, people, place and space, and their influence on our needs for safety and our well-being. And we scoped up this particular part of the study during the pandemic, the initial outbreak. So it was particularly related to COVID-19 in our thinking that there's some urgency and some change in terms of how we might look at home going into the future. So the aim of that is also to construct, to co-construct with whānau models that might kind of introduce how whānau will want to live in spaces and how we might kind of assist in doing that, and also to have indicators of whether those models can work and to evaluate the feasibility of them further ahead. So just in terms of how we're doing the study, it's a kaupapa Māori methodology, which is how we do all our research. And it's also around using a thing called appreciative inquiry, which is a methodology that we particularly chose because it's able to pick up, I guess, more on aspirations and dreams rather than go back to the sort of deficit inquiry that we often have. So appreciative inquiry has discovery, dream, design, and delivery as part of its methodology. And so far we're in year 2, and we are in the stage of looking at discovery and dream, and then we're moving into the design phase. We have done whānau interviews in the Rangitike, Hauraki, Whanganui, and Tāmaki Makaurau. We've also done stakeholder interviews in terms of people working in the space of home and housing. And we are going on to doing iwi wānanga and the co-construction wānanga next year. So just, I guess, our early findings then have been, have been telling and building on our understanding of what Amohia demonstrated home means. There is, the thing that keeps coming up in our interviews is the difference between housing and homing people. So we have the immediate need for people to have a roof over their heads, and many, many of our stakeholders talked about working in that space. And then we have the other sort of conceptualizations around home and what that means, and people working in that space. And that I think there's still a sort of lot of bridging to do and understanding how to deliver both of these things sustainably. People talked about that the system reinforces Māori homelessness. And when I say homelessness, I don't mean being without a house. I mean the homelessness that is experienced, and questions around how much of homing and housing is actually in our control when systemically we kind of have these real barriers to being in a good, flourishing, nourishing space. We also talked to whānau. He said, in terms of asking people to dream and aspire, that the dreaming was really difficult in the sense that some of our horizons have been impacted by colonization, and that if you're just thinking about having, a roof over your head or providing kai for your mokopuna, then dreaming is a really hard thing to do. We also talked a lot about resourcing. There's a lot of kōrero around resourcing in terms of, we've got the Maihi Ka Ora National Māori Housing Strategy, but that doesn't seem to have yet hit the ground in terms of how the resourcing is matching up with the need. Whānau talked a lot around how their feeling and their search for home is intrinsically connected to their journey of well-being as a whole. So it's a holistic sort of merging, and that there's an element of healing associated in finding that home space. We definitely, one of the things that got highlighted is that we definitely need more research around how our needs change with age and experience, and what does that mean if we're planning for delivery of sustainable lifetime homing provision. And then, of course, the evolving climate crisis, that the impacts of that have become particularly obvious in our interviews since January of this year, when a lot of Māori talked about feeling really vulnerable, feeling this great sense of urgency. And just as a quick comparison, if we're thinking about what happened in the early stages of the pandemic, where Māori were enabled to kind of lead some of that early response out, and they did really well for communities, that hasn't happened in the climate crisis space. So really looking at what that means for the future. And And because our project is still early days, but some of the messages that we're getting from whānau and stakeholders is around that ultimately what's needed is systems change. So we have a whole bunch of things that are kind of going on, and there's amazing programs, projects, people on the ground making change, but until it's linked together in a whole systemic change approach, that might not work. So people talked about needing to have meaningful Māori designed and led partnerships, so no more silos. They also talked about changing mindsets, and Amohia mentioned the idea of having the mindset of home as being a house and house being an asset. So it's around wealth accumulation, and that until we're able to change those mindsets around that, having a home or a house is around wealth and property and portfolios and tax, we're always going to have inequity in that space. And conversations need to shift to security and sovereignty of tenure. So it really needs to shift away from the property to like tenure and having mixed models around that too, because as we saw in the videos, not everyone feels connected to a home, like a whenua type home. So providing for people across that spectrum. And also people really want to see a commitment from the government in terms of a bipartisan agreement, which would, kind of stand across the sustainability beyond the 3-year election cycle that we see at the moment, and where we are, at this point in time, again, with a new government coming in and potentially, changing things. So yeah, those were some of the early findings and the early kind of ways of thinking about where we might go from here. We're going to keep working on this. We've got another 2.5, 3 years to go, so we'll be checking back in then. So kia ora, I'm going to hand it over to James.
Kia ora, Tanya. Morena e te iwi, and ngā mihi mahana ki Amohia korua ko Tanya for your beautiful kōrero and the videos, and I'm feeling like I wish I went first because I don't know if I can follow those up, but I'm going to distract you with some slides though. So ko waio, ko whangataua te maunga, ko kāreri kura te awa, ko tinana te waka, ko te raroa me te haupori ngā iwi, ko Roma te marae, ko James Bergen tōku ingoa, no ahipara me te onero o tohe ahau, engari kei pōneke taku kainga I nainei, e mahi ana hau ki te heringa waka. So yeah, I'm James. I whakapapa to the far north, on the west coast at the bottom end of 90 Mile Beach, but currently based in Wellington. And I know it's quite common, but I just wanted to introduce this photo. This is how I always tend to start my presentations, because for me this is my representation of home. So this is my cultural landscape. It's taken from a different maunga so that I can see whangataua and my maunga on the right hand side there. You can see the river, the marae is on the other side of the maunga there. But for me, this is home. This is my cultural landscape. And I kind of liken it, I think Fiona Cram once mentioned, talking about it as a cultural GPS system. So that landscape is my cultural positioning system. That's my way of locating myself when I'm lost and when I feel like connecting back to home. And so it's really nice to hear those notions and seeing the conversations in the chat come through as well about home being much broader than the four walls and extending into some broader physical and metaphysical landscapes as well. So what am I going to talk about? There's lots and lots of work out there on, particularly with Papakainga and on just trying to get it done. That there's so many things to consider and so many hoops to jump through, and it can be really hard just to get to that end point of getting it done. But one of my favorite analogies about housing and home is that it's like gardening. So you don't put all this effort into building the marakai and then it's done. you've got to tend to it, you've got to weed the garden, you've got to look after it so that you can enjoy the kai that comes from it. So housing is a verb, it's an act, it's never finished, and similarly homing is that act. In the same vein, one of the things that I think is talked about much less around Papakainga is that social infrastructure. So once you build this beautiful kainga with warm and dry homes and fingers crossed a super slick ownership and tenure structure, for some people there's this question of how do we learn or how do we relearn to live together, particularly for people that have been, I guess, living out or away from a kainga environment. It's almost how do you decolonize that notion? How do you live again with other people? So that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. So I'm going to give you a few tips on how you can use the physical design of the kainga to essentially to manipulate people, but to make it easier for people to do some of that relearning, to engage in some of those behaviors, hopefully without even knowing it. So some of these tips are drawing from my PhD research, where I looked at two housing typologies, co-housing and Papakainga. And while they come from quite different origins, they share a lot of values around coming together and living as a collective. So they both have typically individual self-sustaining households, but then they also offer a type of housing plus that you can access some extra benefits on top of just an individual house, and you can benefit from that living collectively. And I posited that there's this, perhaps there's this middle space creatively named Papakainga or Papakāinga that brings together some elements of the two. So perhaps that's one step back from a Papakainga, which is being on your ancestral land, but possibly living together based on a shared kaupapa. And so it was really nice to hear some of those sentiments in the videos that Amohi and Tanya shared earlier as well. And what does that look like if it's away from your ancestral whenua? But my top tips, 4 top tips. The first one, and perhaps the most important and most commonly referenced principle, is about designing for foot traffic first. So how can we build highways for people in a development rather than cars? So this is Earthsong, a co-housing development in Ranui, which was constructed about 20 years ago. But instead of every home having their own internal garage where you can drive in, shut the door and then walk straight into the house, you might notice that all the car parking is pushed to the western boundary of the site. And then from that car parking area, there's a network of footpaths that link up that car park to the individual whare. So this has a couple of benefits. Roading is a very expensive component of development, but it also takes up a lot of space to build roads to all of those individual homes. The other benefit is that all of a sudden, if I live here, I have to walk from my car to my front door. So all 32 homes here have to walk either a few meters or maybe up to 50 meters or more, but they're funneled along just a few pedestrian pathways, and you might be able to notice a sort of a figure 8 shape running through the center of the site. So you're increasing the chances that people will bump into someone as they're arriving or leaving or moving around the site. Similarly, this is Saterdamen in Denmark, built in the 1970s. So this is one of the earliest co-housing communities that was built, and their car parking is located in a central spine for the site. And then same thing, 2 loops of pedestrian footpaths. So again, increasing the chance that you'll bump into someone, even if it's just a smile, just those little interactions that can build up day after day. Tip number 2 is to build in some gathering nodes. So these can be formal gathering nodes and informal gathering nodes. So you've got those footpaths. You might actually go a step further and build in some physical spaces that bring people together, increasing those chances that people can come together and connect. So this is an early image of Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei's development, Kainga Tuatahi in Ōrākei. So this image is just showing a marakai, so a shared garden on the site that whānau living here can access as a as a collective infrastructure. Similarly, across the road, there's a shared space, a gathering node, which is a playground, so a space that the tamariki can come together and play together. And sometimes as a designer, it could be counter to your initial, I guess, aspirations. And sometimes it's actually designing in blank space. So I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but there's a portion of kind of grassed area on the left-hand side here. And it was specifically designed as space that doesn't have a use. So it's left there for the whānau who move into that development to decide what they want to use that space as. So maybe there's that element of not designing everything as well. In co-housing, the common house is the most obvious and explicit example. So this photo on the bottom right is Earth Song's co-house, common house, sorry. So it's a multi-purpose facility, and this is kind of where the housing plus element comes in. So this one has a commercial kitchen. It has multi-function spaces. So there's tables, there's a space that you could use for yoga or other activities. There's a shared laundromat. It could be as simple as co-locating the mailboxes. So again, people come together or have more chance of bumping into one another just by collecting the mail. It could be a workshop. So common in co-housing examples is to have a shared workshop. So each household doesn't need their own individual tools, or similarly, if they don't want their own washing machine and dryer, you could have your own, but if you don't want to, maybe there's a shared facility on site. Same thing, these act as bumping spaces, so spaces where people could run into one another and interact. Tip number 3 is to think about how we can gradually transition between public and private space. So typically in a kind of standalone section on the left-hand side, you might be on the street, in the public space, and then you enter your private household. So you've got these 2 layers of public to private. In co-housing, on the other hand, you might leave that public space and enter the communal driveway. Then from that communal driveway, you might go onto a shared footpath, which might just be shared amongst that small cluster of houses. And then from that shared space, you go into your private house. So we've shifted from 4 layers from that transition from public to private space. If we think about it the other way, that opens up some interesting opportunities if you're in your dwelling and maybe want to kind of open yourself to some interactions with other people. Maybe you move out into that shared space and there's just a smaller group of people, or there's a chance for different connections to form at those different scales than just having the binary public-private. And I will say a disclaimer that this example is not saying that there's no chance for connections on the left, that we see lots of connections like that, but this is just one way we can kind of make that a little bit easier. And then finally, I am conscious that I might be making it sound all cheery and wonderful, but sometimes you get home from work and you really just want to get in the door and put your feet up, and that's okay too. So we see a lot of communities develop certain behaviors and norms that you can use to signal that, hey, maybe today's not the day. I'm not up for a chat today. I just want to go home. So a couple of examples of that in Earth Song. It's as simple as walking along the footpath with your head down or looking at the ground. So it's an accepted behavior that other residents know if they see someone with their head down like that as they're walking, they know not to engage, that person needs a bit of space. Similarly, in one of the Papakainga, it was about shutting the curtain over the window on the front door. So it's effectively a signal that said, kind of do not disturb, just we need our privacy at this time. So they're just some considerations to think about. So yeah, those were some super speedy top tips on ways that we can consciously consider how we might foster some of that social infrastructure in a collective development or collective community like this. I will stop sharing and pass it back to Joanne. Thanks.
Those are all brilliant, by the way. Amazing. Thank you. I won't talk too much myself because I know we don't have a whole lot of time. The question here have whānau haua, so the disability community, been included in the research, also wider whānau who care for whānau with autism? Will culturally appropriate respite care be included? I might just pose that to everybody because I'm not too sure what that was in reference to. If it's not, yeah. So I might start with here or Tanya in relation to your kaupapa. And
Tanya, sorry,
Oh.
Joanne. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think they were a focus in the Catalyst research, and certainly not in the small study we did comparing urban and rural, which is not to say we wouldn't. It's just that we didn't identify no one identified as whānau hawa within those groups. And I'm not sure about the tōmato one.
Yeah, Papakāinga, we are looking also at diversity. So when we're talking to whānau, we're trying to get diversity. We're also talking to providers around respite and what that looks like. So yeah, we're including them at this point. I don't have any conclusions to offer though.
Yeah, and I'll say the same. Great question, and there were kind of no whānau hawa explicitly in the research I've done, but I will mention that there are some really nice examples of particularly co-housing building in or prioritizing universal design components, and that might be a ground floor apartment that's fully accessible so that whānau can stay in the development if their circumstances change or people can age in place. And I know that's only touching on physical mobility, but that's one example. Yeah, good.
I don't know why I just cut out there for a minute. Hopefully, that wasn't too big a deal. So thank you all for your responses there. Another question. I am from a coastal seafaring iwi. For me and our whānau, we connect not only to the land, but also to the moana in the area. Is this a commonality amongst Māori? Anyone who'd like to could maybe take a stab at that one.
Certainly for Ngāti Hauti, it is not an issue. They have other issues. They're landlocked. So the issues that are raised for Ngāti Hauti are around accessing landlocked land, which is a whole nother issue that probably requires its own webinar. But yeah, not for Hauti. Sorry.
Couple. Another question is, potentially this is more aimed at James. Co-housing projects sometimes can find it difficult to be able to speak to blank spaces as city councils can't see a purpose. What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, I agree. Yeah, and I think part of that is hopefully, yeah, I think there's an element of doing what we can to build up a bit of an evidence base to be able to kind of push back, I guess, on some regulations that might challenge us a bit and say, well, actually, we've got this really strong evidence on why we need to leave this area undesigned. Yeah, it's one of the fun many hoops we have.
Are there any Papakainga currently implementing this kaupapa? I suppose that's potentially in relation to your research, James.
Yeah, I think there are elements of it coming through. So some Papakainga are building in these elements. I think co-housing has documented a lot of their design principles, perhaps quite explicitly, and since that first one, which was done around the 70s, so they've had about 50 years of documenting and distributing handbooks and guidelines with a really explicit focus on that design element. And I think that's starting to get picked up in some of the kind of developments from Māori collectives. So for instance, there's developments that I'm kind of loosely involved in as a researcher, where they're starting to build in community hubs, so that specific shared communal building where whānau can access that extra space. And it might be things like having a guest room. So rather than every whare needing to have an extra bedroom themselves to host visitors, that there's this communal hub, and there's 1 or 2 bedrooms in that communal hub as well. So that's accessible by all the individual whare at other times. So yeah, sorry, long answer to saying yes, I think we're starting to see some come through.
Oh, thank you. Another one, which I think could be responded to by anyone, so I might just go around. So is there a right number of units to build? Say 20, 10. Also, what are the solutions for antisocial behaviour? I mean, people can interpret that however they want to respond to. So I might throw it over to Amo here or Tanya, and then back to James.
Sorry, I don't have an answer for that one.
All good.
That's way outside my remit.
I can probably comment on that, just in terms of, I don't know what the right number of units is to build, but whānau did talk about, some whānau did talk about their kind of concept of Papakainga as being one that wasn't necessarily kind of traditional. It was kind of like this, this way of living with people that they chose. So it wasn't necessarily always the extended whānau. So it could be, you know, I've got my best friend living next to me, and then I've got this person here, and together we can all work to look after the tamariki, for instance. So there was, you know, that sort of real purposeful kind of construction of Papakainga, but they didn't say how many those might be. What was the second part of the question? I think I did have an answer to that as well.
It was around antisocial behaviour.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Again, not conclusive on this, but we did talk to some stakeholders who had said that things really changed when they proposed, like in a social housing setting, when they proposed that whānau themselves made the rules around what should happen in that shared space, so that it wasn't an imposed thing from the top going, you must not do this and you must not do that. So it was whānau coming into those spaces and saying, well, what do you want to have happen in your home? You know, what are the boundaries? What are the rules? And that worked really well, because it was tino rangatiratanga, and it was actually, you know, a really good way to kind of have social rules without it feeling imposed and wrong. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add to the first question. I'm wary of putting an exact number on it, but I know the co-housing literature especially talks about having a minimum of around 6 households, so that you've got enough diversity there that you're kind of not in each other's faces all the time, that there's enough, I guess, of a buffer there. And they talk around about 30 to 35 as a maximum number, before you need to start having secondary infrastructure. So you might have one common house for every 20 to 30 whare, but then as the development grows beyond that kind of 30 to 35, you're looking at making another cluster kind of before it gets too big.
Cool. There's potentially one more. I'll just ask and see where we go. So someone has asked Jack about a comment earlier that kainga Oranga government policy and its funds have not quite hit the ground. I'm not 100% sure who had raised that, but could the panel expand on this a bit more, or provide perspectives on how this wider Māori housing strategy is or isn't hitting where it needs to be for Papakainga provision? I've only got maybe a few minutes, but if anyone who feels confident to tackle that one could, that would be great.
Was it the mahi ka ora strategy that I mentioned?
Potentially.
Okay. I guess my comment is just in terms of what whānau and providers are telling us, which is that it hasn't quite aligned to what is currently already going on. And I don't think, at this stage, it has enough time to roll out as well. And that the funds are kind of being put into specific areas that are not necessarily the areas that whānau need support in. So some whānau do, some don't. So that is the stuff that we're hearing on the ground at the moment. But James, you might have another view on that as well.
Yeah, what was the question?
Just about the wider Māori housing strategy. Is it or not, doing what it should in terms of providing for Papakainga housing?
Yeah, I think, oh, that's a good question. I think there's probably a bit of, I could see some time being needed just to see how it embeds in, particularly how some of the funding avenues have a chance to kind of come through. Yes, I think I'd like to see how it goes. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. And I suppose there's broader.
Can I just say one thing? Like,
yes.
Like with everything to do with Māori, right? It's so. This throws up the importance that it's not just the responsibility of one government department. This is what we tend to do all the time, and we silo everything. So some of the issues that we've raised in this are around, we need to figure out land tenure, we need to work with banks, we need to work with a multitude of government agencies, housing, social development, like we need, as we always do, a real cross-sector approach, including Crown, iwi and private, for this massive issue to be resolved. And until we can have those sorts of conversations, it's kind of like who's looking after the water, right? Until we can have those conversations, we're just going to sort of chop away piecemeal. It's just so complex and integrated, and our whānau deserve the best. So yeah, we need those heads around the table. Yeah.
Kia ora, that's a really great point on which to probably end it, and a really important challenge to all those involved in those spaces to how to work together. I will leave it there because we're pretty much at the end, and hand it back to Moana. But thank you all so much for coming along and participating in this kōrero.
Kia ora, thank you, Joe, and a huge thank you again to our wonderful presenters. Thank you all for your participation in our kōrero and in the chat. It's been a wonderful session, and obviously there's still so much more in this emerging space moving forward. So I'll just close us with a karakia. Kua mutu a mātou mahi I tēnei wā. Manakitea mai mātou katoa. O mātou hoa o mātou whānau. Aio ki tā aorangi. Thank you all. As we've said, this presentation will be available on our website. You can find our wonderful presenters' research on our website as well. And there'll be a survey going out to all participants afterwards as well. So thank you all, and have a wonderful morning.